The silence aboard Orbital 6 was unlike the silence of space. Space was endless and empty, swallowing sound before it began. The station's quiet, however, carried the weight of absence. Empty corridors where voices once echoed and workstations now abandoned. Crane stood at the observation deck, looking down at the planet through reinforced transparel. From here, it seemed almost calm. Bands of brown and gray cloud concealed the devastation below. The coffee in his hands had long since gone cold, but he held the mug anyway. It gave his hand something to do, a small normality in a world where normal no longer existed. Behind him, the communications array flickered with automated signals, maintenance reports, orbital calculations, the steady pulse of systems still running even as their operators fled or died. He was supposed to monitor those signals, to keep the link alive between orbital platforms and what remained of civilization below. But for the past week, fewer and fewer voices had answered his calls. The war was ending, people said. The real question was what would be left afterward. A soft chime drew his attention to the main console. An incoming transmission from the surface. Weak, distorted, but human. Crane set down his mug and moved to the controls with the practiced efficiency of someone who had turned isolation into routine. Orbital 6, this is Strike Team Gamma requesting immediate medical evacuation. We have casualties. Repeat, we have static. Consume the rest. Crane worked quickly with the signal processors, boosting gain and filtering interference, but the transmission vanished. Just another voice swallowed by the electronic void. He cycled through frequencies, trying to re-establish contact, but nothing came back. The silence returned, heavier than before. The duty roster on the wall showed names crossed out in red ink. Colleagues evacuated, reassigned, or simply gone. His own name sat at the bottom of a very short list. The last engineer keeping the station alive. He told himself it was duty that kept him here. But in the quiet hum of artificial gravity and recycling systems at night, he wondered if it was really just fear of being alone somewhere else. At least here, surrounded by familiar maintenance requests and orbital mechanics, he could pretend he was still needed, still part of something bigger than himself. Below, the planet rotated slowly, its secrets hidden beneath clouds and interference. Somewhere down there, people were fighting, dying, and calling for help that might never arrive. Crane turned back to his console and began composing another general broadcast, adding his voice to the electronic chorus drifting between worlds. Someone had to keep trying. Someone had to maintain the link, even if he was the only one left to listen. The acrid smoke stung Crane's eyes as he stepped carefully across the battlefield, his engineer's toolkit clanking against his hip. The ground was scorched earth and melted metal, still hot from the plasma bombardment 3 hours earlier. Bodies lay scattered like broken dolls, some human, others no longer recognizable as the cybernetic horrors they had become. The air tasted of copper and ozone, thick enough to coat his throat. He shouldn't have been here. Engineers from Orbital 6 were meant to stay in safe zones, repairing arrays and maintaining life support. But when the distress beacon cut out mid-transmission, someone had to investigate. Someone always did. The crater stretched before him like a wound in the planet's surface, 100 meters across and so deep its bottom vanished into shadow. Steam rose from its edges where superheated rock met thin atmosphere. His scanner flickered with interference from the weapon's discharge. He would have to rely on his eyes and instincts. Then he saw the glint of metal. At first, it looked like debris, another piece of shattered machinery to catalog. But as he scrambled down the steep side, stones sliding ahead of him, the shape became clearer. Human. She was pinned under a twisted beam from what had once been a defensive turret. Her body buried beneath concrete and metal. Her armor was a masterpiece of battlefield engineering, its plates scarred by countless impacts, but still intact. A cracked helmet revealed a spiderweb of fractures that somehow hadn't fully broken. but she was breathing, her chest rising and falling in weak, irregular rhythms echoing the planet's own labored pulse. "Can you hear me?" Crane called, his voice echoing strangely in the crater. He dropped to his knees beside her, hands moving automatically to check her pulse. She flinched at his touch, jerking as if shocked. Through the broken visor, her eyes stared back bright green, not with fear, but with something worse. Shame burned there like a dying star. Her hand twitched weakly toward a combat knife at her side, but the motion was feeble, disconnected from strength. The effort left her gasping, fluid rattling in her lungs. "Kill me," she whispered, so softly he almost missed it over the settling debris. "Or leave." The words struck him like a blow. He had heard them before from other soldiers, other casualties of this endless war. But her voice was different, not desperate to escape death, but weary from carrying it too long. He didn't leave. He began the slow work of excavation, moving debris piece by piece, mindful not to cause further harm. His engineering training guided him: load distribution, stress points, the fragile balance of rubble. With each piece removed, more of her was revealed, more of the devastation she had endured. When he had cleared enough to see her properly, his breath caught. The armor wasn't just protection. It was holding her together. Microservos hummed quietly, supporting where muscle and bone had failed. Biomonitors flickered grimly along the inner surfaces, painting a picture of systemic failure. Her face, finally visible when he lifted the helmet away, stopped him completely. She was beautiful like an ancient statue, carved by suffering into something timeless. Her skin was pale and almost translucent, dark veins visible beneath, like cracks in marble. Her blood-matted hair might once have been golden. "This isn't from battle," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "These wounds are too old, too systematic." She turned her face away, as if his gaze hurt more than her injuries. "On Crane," he said, settling back on his heels and pulling a medical kit from his toolkit. "Engineer from Orbital 6, not a soldier. And I'm not leaving you here." "Why?" The single word carried the weight of countless abandonments. He paused, hands still over the bandages. Why risk his life for a stranger? Why stay when she'd told him to leave? "Because you didn't ask for help," he said finally. "And that's the loudest cry for it I've ever heard." Moving her took planning and improvisation. He couldn't risk standard extraction. Her condition was too fragile, the armor too integrated with her failing body. He built a makeshift stretcher from debris and his equipment, cushioning it with whatever fabric he could find. The journey to shelter took nearly 2 hours across hostile terrain. The planet's twin suns beat down mercilessly, turning his clothes into a sweat-soaked second skin. The thin air left him gasping, and aftershocks from the bombardment made every step uncertain. He found refuge in a former mining shaft carved deep into the bedrock, its shielding blocking most detection. The entrance, hidden behind cables and twisted metal, had likely saved it from destruction. Inside, the air was cooler, carrying the faint hum of ancient machinery still running in the depths. Emergency lights cast an amber glow, their shadows flickering on the walls like ghosts dot by that light. He worked carefully, removing pieces of her armor to assess the damage. What he found defied easy classification. Burns covered her torso, old, months or years healed. The blue veins he'd seen on her face were more pronounced here, forming intricate patterns like alien calligraphy. Blood trickled from wounds that should have closed long ago. Dark against pale skin, but more disturbing was the muscle loss, leaving her frame fragile beneath the armor. "This isn't from battle," he repeated, this time as a statement. "What happened to you?" She stayed silent, watching him with eyes that measured every move. There was intelligence there, and something sharper, a predator's awareness reminding him she was still a soldier. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, cleaning and bandaging her wounds with methodical precision. "So you might as well talk to me. Silence gets loud down here." Still nothing. But he thought he saw her expression shift, a faint softening around her eyes. "Look, I've got time," he said, leaning back against a piece of machinery. "More than either of us probably has supplies for. So we can do this the easy way, where you tell me what's wrong so I can help. Or the hard way, where I make terrible guesses until you're annoyed enough to correct me." That earned the ghost of a smile. "Fine," she whispered at last. "My name is Serena. The armor isn't just protection, it's life support. What you see underneath isn't battle damage. It's a disease, a gift from the old wars, passed down through blood and bone." Her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty, the kind that comes from living with a truth too terrible to doubt. It eats muscle tissue first, then moves to the organs. The heart goes last not because it's stronger, but because the body saves it for final moments. The armor monitors everything, compensates where it can, keeps me functional long enough to. She trailed off. Long enough to what? Long enough to die with some dignity or purpose, whichever comes first. Cold settled in Crane's chest. He had seen battlefield diseases before, weapons that turned bodies against themselves. But this was different, subtle, cruel. A slow dissolution instead of a quick death. "But you keep fighting," he said. "Because no one can see what's underneath," she replied. "The armor hides the weakness, makes me look strong. And strength is all that matters in war." "I can see it now," he said. She looked at him then, truly looked. Her green eyes like deep ocean water, beautiful and alien. "Yes," she said softly. "You can." They moved at dawn, when the planet's twin suns created enough glare to mask their heat signatures from orbital surveillance. The scorched valley stretched before them like a road through hell, its walls rising in twisted formations of melted rock and metal. Crane supported her weight as they walked, his arm around her waist while she leaned on his shoulder. The armor helped servos and micromotors, easing some of the burden, but each step cost her. Her breathing was labored despite the suit's processors, and more than once she stumbled before the armor corrected her. Still, she walked upright and unbroken, as if each step was defiance against whatever consumed her. "The disease," she said during one of their brief rest stops, "it isn't random. It was engineered to target specific genetic markers common in my people, your people, the Carnith clans. We were warriors. We're warriors." That word loses meaning when too few remain for it to matter. Her tone carried a bitterness that went beyond personal pain. Someone decided we were too dangerous, so they made something to erase us slowly. Naturally, as if it were bad fortune rather than extermination. Crane felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard rumors of such weapons before, engineered diseases aimed at certain groups. But hearing it from someone who had lived through it made the horror real. "I led the strike on the weapons facility where it was created," she went on. "Thought we might find a cure, or at least answers. Instead, I only found more questions and proof that whoever designed this had been extremely thorough." They walked in silence, weaving through rubble and cratered ground that told a story of deliberate destruction. This wasn't war. It was execution. "The wounds killing me aren't from battle," she said finally. "They come from inside. A body trained to turn on itself, system by system." Her voice sounded far away. "I still see their faces, my strike team. 37 of the finest our clans ever had." She paused, her breathing rough. "I led them there, believing we could end our suffering. Instead, we stepped into a trap made for us." Crane felt her weight shift, her armor stabilizers humming as they tried to steady her. The place was empty when we arrived. Silent corridors, dark systems, only abandoned research data and samples. Then we found the chamber's vast tanks growing the pathogen that now kills us. For a moment, I thought we had won. Her laugh was bitter. But the containment breach was no accident. It was the trap's final move. As we entered the lab, Automated systems released aerosol versions of every strain they had developed. 37 variants, each one crafted to attack a different part of Karnath biology. She stopped walking, her armor groaning as it bore her weight. I watched my warriors die, one by one. Some lasted hours, others minutes. The strongest fell first, their immune systems tearing themselves apart. But you lived, Crane said gently. Commander Voss made that happen, she answered, voice flat with old sorrow. When it was clear the mission had failed and the sickness was spreading, he acted. He sealed me in a quarantine pod and ejected me before the place collapsed. Crane heard her voice crack under the weight of decades of guilt. He told me I had to survive, to warn our people, to carry the truth. But I knew better. Her helmet turned toward him, cracked visor hiding tears. He saved me because I was already infected. Because letting me live was crueler than letting me die. You can't know that. I felt it begin even as the pod carried me away, the weakness, my heart faltering against an invisible fight. He knew I'd suffer. He knew I'd die slowly, carrying the weight of failure like a second disease. She moved again, armor pushing her forward more than willpower. I should have stayed. Should have died with them, not fled. But you didn't flee, Crane said with conviction. You survived. You carried the warning. You kept fighting even as your body failed. And you still don't quit. She stayed silent so long he thought she hadn't heard. Then she whispered, because surrender means they win. And I've seen too many friends die to give them that. But also her voice nearly broke because Voss was wrong. I wasn't the mission's hope. I was its failure. And failures don't rest until they find balance. I see you, Crane said. She stopped, turning toward him with an unreadable expression. Surprise, maybe. Or something deeper. Yes, she answered at last. You do. Night brought new dangers. The ecosystem shattered by bombardment forced all survivors into desperate scavenging. Some hunted only food. Others hunted for more. Crane sensed them before he saw them. Boots scraping stone, weapons being drawn. He had no combat training, but his engineer's mind knew how to build solutions. From spare components he shaped noisemakers and light traps. Crude, but enough to confuse scavengers in the dark. His decoys cast shifting holograms on the cave walls, complete with heat signatures. Not enough to trick armies, but perfect against raiders. The attack came quick. 3 figures in scavenged armor, weapons cobbled from scraps. Trophy hunters, drawn by the scent of the dying. Serena moved like a storm, blade flashing into her hand. Her strikes were ragged but lethal. One attacker pinned Crane, pressing sharp metal to his throat. He smelled the hunger on the man's breath, saw madness in his eyes. Then Serena was there, intercepting with impossible speed. She took the hit on her armor, thunder cracking from the impact, then drove her blade home. The effort dropped her to her knees, but the threat was over. Her armor sputtered with new damage, warning lights flashing. Crane steadied her. You don't have to protect me. And you don't need to save someone already dying, she answered, weary. Maybe I do, he said. She studied him, and for a moment he saw something shift in her eyes. Maybe you do, she whispered. They reached an abandoned observation post, its shell intact, hidden among rocks. From here, they had a clear view for kilometers. Inside, Crane tried to ease her pain. He made compresses, offered water, told stories from his life in orbit. He described artificial dawns, gardens grown in steel, his mother's songs that carried across the stars. Gently, he sang one about sailors finding safe harbor. His voice was rough, but it filled the silence with comfort. She laughed, soft but transforming. For a moment he glimpsed the woman beneath the armor, someone who might have danced, argued, or read for pleasure. You're a strange man, Crane of Orbital 6, she said, voice lighter than before. Warm, maybe. Or becoming so. You're stubborn too, he answered, The smile faded. I'm no warrior. Warriors fight, protect. I'm only wearing the shell while everything inside rots. He leaned close, unfastening her chest plate. She didn't resist. Beneath scars and blue-veined illness, her heart still beat steady. To me, he said softly, you're the strongest person I've ever met. She rested against him, trust in her weight. Together, they watched alien stars drift past cracked glass. Dawn brought terror. Drones appeared in the sky, their patterns too precise to be natural. Military relics, still obeying old commands. One locked onto them, its beam sweeping across Crane's chest. Weapon systems charging. Hunter-killer, Serena said grimly. They won't stop. I've seen them, Crane replied. Worked on captured units. Strong, but predictable. If I can lead it into the ravine, that's suicide. Not if I time it right. He dashed toward the narrow cut in the hillside. The ceiling unstable. If he could bring it down, maybe. The drone followed with mechanical focus. Laser sights painted him red as he dove inside. Rocks rained from above. The drone hesitated, detecting danger, but programming drove it forward. Come on, Crane muttered. Pursue and eliminate. It entered, scraping walls, sparks flying. Crane triggered his crude explosive, placed with precision. The blast was small, but the collapse it triggered was massive. Stone thundered down, burying the passage in the machine. But he miscalculated. The shockwave slammed him into the wall. Pain tore through his leg, hot metal cutting deep. The world went black. He woke to filtered light, pain throbbing with each beat. Serena knelt beside him, sealed fully in her armor again. After the closeness they had shared, seeing her hidden felt like loss. Why? He whispered. Because you were unconscious 6 hours, she said through the mechanical filter. Because I had to pull you out piece by piece while the rock still burned. Because her voice cracked. Because I have never been so afraid. It entered, scraping walls, sparks flying. Crane triggered his crude explosive, placed with precision. The blast was small, but the collapse it triggered was massive. Stone thundered down, burying the passage in the machine. But he miscalculated. The shockwave slammed him into the wall. Pain tore through his leg, hot metal cutting deep. The world went black. He woke to filtered light, pain throbbing with each beat. Serena knelt beside him, sealed fully in her armor again. After the closeness they had shared, seeing her hidden felt like loss. Why? He whispered. Because you were unconscious 6 hours, she said through the mechanical filter. Because I had to pull you out piece by piece while the rock still burned. Because her voice cracked. Because I have never been so afraid. It entered. Scraping walls, sparks flying. Crane triggered his crude explosive, placed with precision. The blast was small, but the collapse it triggered was massive. Stone thundered down, burying the passage in the machine. But he miscalculated. The shockwave slammed him into the wall. Pain tore through his leg, hot metal cutting deep. The world went black. He woke to filtered light, pain throbbing with each beat. Serena knelt beside him, sealed fully in her armor again. After the closeness they had shared, seeing her hidden felt like loss. Why? He whispered. Because you were unconscious 6 hours, she said through the mechanical filter. Because I had to pull you out piece by piece while the rock still burned. Because her voice cracked. Because I have never been so afraid.